There has been a whole lot of talk lately about Apple releasing their own electric vehicle, and most of this was kickstarted by a report from Reuters, who basically just came forward and said Apple is working on their own car, and it could come out by 2024, and they're mainly going to be using a lot of the same battery chemistry that Tesla is using. So in their report, they said lithium iron phosphate cells, which Tesla is using already, and they also said a monocell design, which Elon Musk even commented on Twitter, saying it's not really possible unless they're referring to a structural battery pack similar to what Tesla talked about at Battery Day. And I personally think this report has a whole lot of baloney smell all over it. And that's not to say I don't want this report to be true. Okay, let me be very clear. I think it would be insanely cool if Apple decided to enter the EV space. They're a huge company. They've got tons of capital. And if they wanted to be more vertically integrated and design the car from the ground up and build their own factories and go head to head with Tesla, I'm a big fan of Apple products and I'm a big fan of Tesla, so having more competition and all that would be awesome, but I have a hard time believing this report, partly because I remember reading reports back in 2015 that Apple was working on a car. Back then it was still being referred to as Project Titan, and people were saying that it would hit city streets by 2020. Except here we are, years almost over, still no Apple car, but now we're hearing reports that it's another 4 years or maybe 5 years away. In Reuters, the people who dropped this report are even plastering a huge disclosure at the end of their article saying, and also there's a chance Apple might not go through with it and they might end up tabling the project and nothing may actually come of this. Now, as someone who's been covering Apple over on my tech channel for many years, and now as someone who's been doing EV videos for over a year, I hate to bring this up, and I know this is not what a lot of us want to hear, but there is a lot of made up stuff and things people just say for the sake of clicks and for the sake of getting attention online, particularly about Apple. Probably more so than any other company I've seen. There are just countless Twitter accounts and people that crown themselves as leakers that will get all kinds of attention for making fairly predictable guesses, and oftentimes will make reports or make claims that are so off into the future that by the time we actually get there and they're proven wrong, no one even remembers the report or remembers the claim in the first place. And this has happened with the Apple car already, given the fact that not that many people were complaining about no Apple car in 2020 because a lot of these reports have died down and people were not focusing on that 2015 Project Titan report, and Apple themselves has been very wishy-washy on the subject of, actually, we're not interested in developing a car ourselves, but we are interested in full self-driving systems. They definitely have patents for design techniques that could go into a car, but as someone who's been reporting on Apple leaks and rumors for years, I can confidently say most of the time Apple has a patent for something, it normally doesn't end up into a future product. There's a lot of patents they have that don't turn into anything. They have patents for touchscreen iMacs that go back a decade, and they have patents for laptops that are powered by your phone that turn into a trackpad when you dock them in place. And they've had patents for fingerprint readers that are built into the display that they didn't use for years. So what I'm trying to say is Apple having a patent on something is not a confirmation that it's ever going to see the light of day. And it's also important to remember that Apple themselves has clarified that there is all types of development and products that they investigate and do a ton of research and development in that never see the light of day. Apple's kind of famous for saying 1,000 no's for every yes. So internally, could Apple be working on some type of self-driving EV, some type of prototype car? Absolutely. Wouldn't shock me in the slightest. But does that mean it's coming out one day and they're going to release it and they're going head-to-head with Tesla? No. If anything, I think we're very far from that actually happening, because in my opinion, if Apple cared about electric vehicles and wanting to enter that market and actually be a major player to go up against legacy automakers and newer automakers like Tesla, they would have entered the market by now. In my opinion, it's kind of too late. You know, people act like Tesla is just going to be stagnant and not really doing anything for the next 4 to 5 years, when reality is they're going to have an entirely different lineup by 2024 or 2025. Cybertrucks are going to be on city streets. Full self-driving is going to be miles better than what it is today. And Tesla will most likely be producing 4 to 5 million vehicles a year by then. And most likely a lot of those vehicles will be under $30,000 and be using iron phosphate batteries and have have decent range, and their higher end vehicles will likely be rocking even more insane performance. Some of them probably going well over 500 miles or 600 miles of range. They're going to have semis on the road. They're going to have billions and billions of autonomous miles driven with data collected that can then train their neural net and make their vehicles better. Tesla's going to be a whole new beast by 2024. So if you're telling me from this report that Apple's just going to start thinking about entering the market by 2024, it's going to be way too late. And honestly, even if Apple entered the market right now, like they announced the Apple Car tomorrow, I still think it would be kind of too late, because Apple is not the type of company to have very, very slim margins on something. And especially with their other product categories, they're more in tune to owning the design but outsourcing the production. And that's not the approach Tesla is taking. They want to own their own factories and build cars themselves. So if Apple is going to have to outsource their battery production and their car production to someone else, I guarantee you they're not going to be price competitive with Tesla, if anything, knowing Apple and how secure they like to have their profit margins. If they enter the EV space, it's most likely going to be with six-figure luxury sedans, and it would not be a compelling threat to Tesla in any way. If anything, it would just be a threat to other smaller EV startups that really haven't delivered a vehicle yet. And I know there's a lot of rumors and leaks going around right now that are suggesting, Apple's partnering with Toshiba, and they're going to use this lithium titanate technology in their batteries, which can make them better performing in the cold weather, and you can charge it from 0 to 100% without damaging it, and a high cycle life and everything. But lithium titanate is not exactly a new battery chemistry, and the energy density is not very good. And channels like The Limiting Factor have already weighed in and saying that the main issue with that type of chemistry is that it's too expensive and the range isn't great. And I highly, highly doubt that Apple would want to pour all of their capital, all of their resources into scaling their supply chains, actually increase the energy density of these batteries while lowering the cost. Apple's typically not the type of company to do that. That's more of a Tesla move of, okay, we're going to be more vertically integrated and start building the batteries ourselves so we can lower the price. Apple's more of the company that would be like, we're going to wait until other companies can supply batteries or supply technology that gets cheaper and competitive and then implement it into our design, or at least that's how they do it with their phones and tablets. I completely agree. It is possible for Apple to get really competitive and blow a bunch of money on their own factories, be a bit more vertically integrated and develop their own car and announce it. Yes, they have the capital. It is physically possible. But whether or not they will, I have more doubts about. Apple CEO Tim Cook is a master of moving inventory, and I think he's done a great job at, increasing the stock price of Apple, and their best-selling products of all time have all been sold with Tim Cook in charge, whether it be the insane sales of the Apple Watch, the wearables market, pivoting towards services, and scaling iPhone production to an extent that was never possible with Steve Jobs. Tim Cook is not a bad CEO, let me be clear on that, but it's also because he's not too much of a risk taker, and he's not the type to want to nearly bankrupt his company just so that they can achieve certain milestones. I think Apple today, as a $2 trillion company, is the type to play it safe, watch what the rest of the industry is doing, and invest wisely. Whereas Tesla, we found out later, is the type of company to take those risks and take many, many quarters of not being profitable. And Elon, when he was deep in the production hell of Model 3, meet with Tim Cook to discuss selling Tesla, which was not even that long ago. We're talking like 3 years ago. Elon Musk was considering selling Tesla to Apple, which is pretty crazy, but Tim Cook didn't want to take the meeting. Now, some people interpreted that as, well, it must be because Apple's developing their own car and they don't want Tesla, but I actually interpreted that as Apple thinks EVs as a whole and producing them at scale is a bit too risky, and they would much rather focus on, like others have said, the in-car experience. They're interested in developing software for full self-driving and perhaps licensing out that software to other car makers in the future and basically building an enhanced CarPlay than they would be actually building the car from the ground up, because that is very difficult to do profitably. Tesla is one of the few companies that has found a way to scale electric vehicle production and do it with a profit, whereas other legacy automakers are selling a lot of compelling EVs, but most of them are doing it at a loss, and that's why they're being somewhat limited with EV production and not pushing it very hard at their dealers and that type of thing. And I'm sure Apple knows that. They're aware of the risk and the insane capital you need to actually start building your own cars, and they don't want to chance it. That's why they're putting so much effort and energy into their services, because those have fairly low overhead and fairly healthy returns, so they get a secure profit margin and they don't have to risk too much money in the process. Plus, they get to sell them and bundle them with all of their pre-existing hardware, whereas trying to pitch, six-figure luxury sedans to, your iPhone users, even the Apple ecosystem would not be too great of a selling point there. I know that that's how a lot of us like Apple, because of how all the products work together and there's that seamless integration, but honestly, how well does a car actually fit into the Apple ecosystem? I mean, we like things like iMessage and AirDrop, and that kind of stuff isn't really going to be super useful in a car. I mean, iMessage integration you already have with CarPlay, so how is the Apple Car really going to be much better for the ecosystem than just any other car on the road that also happens to have CarPlay? Other important thing to keep in mind about leaks and rumors going around about Apple, which a lot of the time are incorrect, is most of the time, if it's a very far away leak or a very far away rumor, it usually ends up being wrong. I just know this from reporting on Apple stuff over the years and getting a lot of stuff right and a lot of stuff wrong. It's that if a leaker is saying Apple's going to do something in 4 to 5 years, they most likely don't end up doing that. Most of our leaks and rumors end up being wrong if they're more than a year away. If it's like within 12 months, the leaks start to get a bit more accurate, but if we're talking about stuff 4 or 5 years in the future, it's very likely Apple doesn't even know what they're going to do. So leakers and journalists acting like they know what Apple's going to do is just silly and unrealistic. So my bet is by 2024, 2025, we might be hearing some other leaker claim Apple's going to have their own car by 2028 or 2027, and the deadline just keeps getting pushed, and it keeps getting pushed back, and because it's so far into the future, no one's really going to remember to go back and check and be like, hey, that report was incorrect. So if you want my personal guess, I don't think Apple's developing their own car. I think what's probably more likely is Apple buying up an EV startup like Lucid, which I think would fit in with their brand and their luxury status they're going for all the time very well, and perhaps Lucid ends up being in a situation where they're kind of tight for cash and Apple swoops in and saves them at the end of the day, and then has Lucid incorporate all of their futuristic custom silicon that they're putting in their Macs right now and their full self-driving software Apple's been developing, and then you have a very luxurious and premium market with Lucid that Apple will own, but they didn't have to front any of the manufacturing costs because Lucid already built out their factory, they already built their design, and they got supply chains in talk, so Apple just kind of comes in at the last minute, gives them a bunch of software and custom stuff for it to fit into the ecosystem, and then sure, you get a few Lucid Airs that show up in Apple stores that people can play with, but Apple developing their own car from the ground up, I'll believe it when I see it, but if I'm not seeing it and Apple's not saying anything about it, it's not confirmed, and just remember, there's a lot of fake stuff that goes around, and there's a lot of people that will say anything they can about Apple just so that they can get attention and they can get clicks and they can get people saying their name, because if they end up being wrong in 4 years, they can say, well, we did say there was a chance it wouldn't happen, so, we said it's possible. So please don't treat this news as a confirmed thing, and again, even if Apple did enter the market, Tesla has a stupidly high lead on them. So they're no threat to Tesla, and honestly, Apple in the EV space, until they have a car that's actually driving on the road, they're not a threat to anybody. If there's points you think I'm missing, feel free to let me know down below. Thank you all for watching, and I hope you have an excellent rest of your day. Take care.